The moment those private letters surfaced, everything we thought we knew about Julia Child shifted. She wasn't just the charming, gentle chef who guided millions through buttery saufatés and creamy sauces. She was a woman of fire, passion, and secrets so bold they defied her pristine TV image. Buckle up, because we're about to unravel the truth hidden inside those letters to Paul Child. And it's a ride you won't believe. From the very first lines, Julia's handwriting leaps off the page. With an almost electrifying energy, she addresses him with familiarity that feels intimate. Yet there's an edge, like a challenge wrapped in affection. These aren't the polite missives meant for broadcast or prime time viewers. They're raw, unfiltered, a peek into the mind of a woman unapologetically herself. Contrast is everywhere in these pages. On one hand, the refined image we know from her shows. The cool, composed professional who measured ingredients like magic formulas. On the other, a private Julia brimming with desire, mischief, and impulsive truth bombs about marriage, temptation, and the kind of passion she couldn't share on national television. As you dive deeper, you'll notice a recurring theme: Julia's fierce commitment to authenticity. Early drafts show her crossing out flowery clichés in favor of blunt, honest advice that made even seasoned chefs gasp. In one unforgettable passage, she writes, "Forget feeding his ego, feed his hunger first." That simple line crackles with subversion. A cooking goddess bent on flipping conventions. And she does it with a wink. But it's not all playful rebellion. These letters also reveal vulnerability and pain. Julia shares moments of heartbreak, miscarriages that left her raw, late nights wrestling with self-doubt, and the ever-present ache of societal expectations clashing with her unorthodox spirit. You can almost hear her pulse quicken as she confesses, "I fear my boldness might be my undoing." It's a confession so human it anchors her larger then life persona back to earth. There's tension between Julia's public triumphs and her private storms. On TV, she chopped chickens with panache, turned butter into ritual, and delivered famous lines with effortless charm. Here, though, she admits to doubting every flourish. Second, guessing each flame-kissed soufflé, and wondering if the laughter she collected on set hid a deeper loneliness behind the lights. Yet even in her most candid moments, Julia writes with humor. A weapon sharper than any knife she ever wielded. When discussing the day Paul called her laugh too wild, she jokes, "I suppose I'd shake the rafters of tradition." It's that blend of audacity and warmth that makes her words sing, drawing even skeptics into her whirlwind. As you stand on this precipice, about to witness revelations that will redefine everything you thought you knew about Julia Child, remember this: these letters are not relics. They're living testaments to a woman who refused to be confined by expectation, genre, or gender roles. She wrote to Paul with the fervor of a pioneer writing home from the frontier. Lines that trembled with hope, longing, and a hunger for truths often left unspoken. So as the first missive unfolds, lean in. Prepare for whispers of temptation, urgent confessions of desire, and a depth of emotion that still resonates decades later. In these pages, you'll find Julia Child in her most authentic form, unfiltered, unafraid, and utterly unforgettable. The truth is here. Are you ready to read the letters that changed everything? In the first letter, dated early spring of 1958, she addresses him as "My dearest Paul," setting a tone of urgency and intimacy. She confesses that her heart feels incomplete without the spark of their shared passion. She recalls a night in Paris when they danced until dawn, wild laughter echoing through empty streets. Moments she describes as the flame that warms every other morning I rise. Her words paint love as an adventure, as vital as breathing, and just as essential to her very being. At the same time, she reveals the cracks hidden behind her composed facade. She admits to moments of jealousy, when Paul's gaze lingered on another classroom, or a fleeting accolade, confessing, "I to be the reason for every beat of your heart." Her language feels like a tempest coiled within porcelain, delicate yet capable of shattering glass with its force. Then, like a sudden twist, she pivots to culinary philosophy, linking romance with gastronomy in a single sweeping gesture. Just as a roux must thicken with patience, so desire should deepen through nurturing, stirring gently until it simmers with richness. Her metaphors feel alive, drawing a vivid parallel between the sensuous art of cooking and the equally complex art of love. As this opening letter unfolds, you see Julia not just as a culinary icon, but as a storyteller unafraid to blend the personal with the profound. Her script, like phrasing, imitates the pacing of her cooking shows, deliberate steps leading to delicious revelations. Each sentence a carefully measured ingredient in a larger feast of emotion and insight. The result is a narrative that feels intimate and expansive, inviting you to taste the forbidden and savor the sublime. That opening confession set the tone for letters that follow, each one a tapestry woven from flame and flower, desire and detail. In the letter penned just weeks later, dated late May 1958, Julia spills secrets about how she tested her bold 3 F's of marriage advice: feed them, flatter them, and flagrantly fan the fires of desire. She describes slipping a small dish of spicy pepper sauce into Paul's midday salad, watching his eyes light up with surprise before he murmured, "You've outdone yourself, my chef." That simple moment captures her playful creed, that love is a recipe, and every meal an invitation to rediscover the spark. She teases him about his penchant for precision, poking fun at his habit of measuring every granule. "Paul, you weigh each grain of salt as if it were a gold coin," she writes with affectionate exasperation. Then she maps out a daring plan for their next Thursday dinner. "I intend to dose your cray, mi broile torch, with a hint of lavender oil. Let's see how long it takes you to notice the floral surprise." Here, cooking melts into courtship, and the kitchen becomes a stage for their private theatrics. Julia's words practically dance across the page, full of impish delight and conspiratorial energy. But the mischief always carries a deeper undercurrent. In the same letter, she confesses a moment of fear. She worries that their passion could fade under the humdrum of daily routine. Too many couples settle for bland companionship. She warns, "But we must stir the pot until it bubbles with excitement." She fears that polite affection could calcify into predictable patterns. So she issues a challenge every month. They will invent a new dish together, one never attempted before, and share a secret toast at midnight. It's an oath as binding as any vow, and she cajoles him to record each creation in a hidden journal. They'll review 50 years hence. Her admonitions aren't delivered with solemn gravity, though. Julia peppers the letter with sly humor. She recalls Paul's earnest attempt to help her knead dough one afternoon, only to end up plastered in flour from head to toe. "You looked like a ghost who'd raided a bakery," she teases. "But I loved every minute. I adore a man who dares to get his hands dirty." That image of a towering, meticulously groomed Paul smeared in white powder reveals how intimacy for them meant vulnerability. Being willing to abandon decorum in pursuit of shared laughter and clumsy joy. Transitioning smoothly, she shifts to reflections on the larger world. Julia comments on the social currents swirling around them in 1958, the rise of convenience cooking, the growing pressure on women to choose between career and home, and the stifling etiquette manuals that dictated how spouses should behave. She bristles at the notion that marriage is a fixed script. Why must love be boxed into outdated rules? She asks. Then, in a flourish of rhetorical daring, she suggests writing their own manifesto, a hand-illustrated booklet entitled The Art of Marriage by Julia and Paul. She vows to write the preface, insisting it open with the line, "To those who believe marriage is an art, know this, the palate must include both sugar and spice." Julia's next letter, arriving in mid-summer, moves from eloquence to urgency. She confesses a restless longing when Paul's work calls him away on a prolonged assignment. "When you're absent, the house hums with silence," she laments. She sketches the compensation. She'll prepare his favorite cassoulet, slow, simmered until the beans ache with flavor, and will leave signed notes hidden inside empty jars. Little love letters disguised as pantry labels. That act of embedding devotion into household routines becomes a beautiful ritual. Every time Paul reaches for a spice jar, he uncovers a morsel of her heart alongside the thyme. Then comes the bombshell passage that stunned historians. Julia reveals she once penned a steamy paragraph describing their post-dinner trysts as a dinner party for two, where the main course is shared breath, and the sweetest sauce is the one we invent in the dark. She admits to drafting it on Dove, gray stationery, then tearing it up in embarrassment. Yet she kept the scraps in her bedside drawer as talismans. That admission shatters any remaining illusion of prim decorum. Here is the Julia child who wrote about desire, with the same flair she reserved for flambe, refusing to separate sensuality from sustenance. The tone of these May and July letters shifts again, this time toward reflection on legacy. Julia wonders what history will remember. Will they praise Misophones in textbooks while ignoring the tumult that shaped them? She resolves to ensure that her private counsel survives the ages by sharing the letters with Paul's sister only after both have passed. She muses that these documents could form the basis for a posthumous memoir, one that doesn't shy away from culinary triumphs, but pairs them with the story of two hearts daring to blaze together. By autumn, the letters become journals of experimentation. Julia details her attempts to create an aphrodisiac salad dressing, combining pomegranate molasses, cracked peppercorns, and a splash of cognac, and urges Paul to critique each iteration with brutal honesty. She imagines their test ritual as an intimate performance, candlelight glinting off daughters of garlic and stolen glances during each spoonful. In every line, she fuses the scientific fervor of a lab researcher with the ardor of a secret lover, refusing to separate her roles as chef and confidante. Together, these documents map a relationship both ordinary and extraordinary, underscored by Julia's conviction that marriage should be approached like a grand culinary adventure. Through humor and heart, she urges Paul, and now us, ever onward, reminding us that the best recipes are those we write ourselves with courage and conviction. Winter arrived with a hush, and Julia's letters shifted into a more introspective cadence. In early December of 1958, she described the way twilight draped itself over her kitchen window, how the low January sun made the copper pots glow like embers. She wrote, almost reverently, about this silence before the storm of her ambitions. In this quiet, she confided, I taste every memory of us, the soft Paris dusk, our laughter echoing off stone walls, the clink of crystal in someone else's drawing room. Even as she reveled in culinary creation, perfecting a velvety chestnut soup, her mind traveled back to those Paris nights. Her words carried the ache of anticipation. She sensed upheaval on the horizon, both in her career and in the private world she'd built with Paul. That same letter unfolded plans for a daring new chapter, Julia's proposal to test drive her television persona before a live audience. She sketched out the anatomy of an inaugural show. Scenes of chopping leeks, tantalizing taste tests, and her signature blend of wit and warmth. She implored Paul to attend the taping in Boston, to witness the moment when her private and public lives would collide. "I need your eyes in the audience," she wrote, "to anchor me when I step into that glaring spotlight." She described the studio lights as both a furnace and a forge, capable of incinerating insecurities, but also of forging an indelible identity. Every step, she promised, would echo with the heartbeat of our partnership. Paul's response arrived as a delicate missive in mid-January. He told her how proud he was, how her vision shimmered through every word. Yet he also lodged a gentle caution. "Remember," he teased, "that the cameras will only see the chef, not the woman behind the whisk." He worried that viewers might love her soufflés more than her soul. In his elegant cursive, he asked for secret cues, subtle signals she could drop on camera to remind him, and only him, that their private world remained untouched. Julia's rejoinder was almost ecstatic. She planned to slip his favorite sherry into her glass on air, raise a half toast to "the one who stirs my pot," and watch for his knowing wink through the lens. In late January, another letter arrived, but this one bristled with tension. Julia confessed a sharp pang of vulnerability the night before rehearsals. She fretted that her calls to "have fun" might sound rehearsed, that her bursts of laughter would seem forced. "I fear I'll emerge as someone half-crafted," she admitted, a silhouette of the true woman who writes these letters. She contemplated autographing her show scripts with a whispered code, embedding a flourish in her signature that only Paul could recognize. That way, each viewer, fascinating moment, would still carry the fingerprint of their courtship. In this way, her performance became an act of intimacy, an invitation and a secret handshake all at once. As February dawned, Julia's letters bristled with exhilaration. She described the debut taping of The French Chef, her knees trembling as she uttered her first televised greeting. "Good evening, I'm Julia Child." She recounted how a rogue spark ignited the gas burner beneath her sauté pan, eliciting gasps from the crew. In the next breath, she admitted how her heart leapt when she spotted Paul in the front row, silhouette backlit by the studio's glow. "When your hand found mine off camera," she wrote, "I tasted triumph sweeter than Croix mi Anglaise." That moment crystallized her belief that personal courage and public success were two strands of the same golden thread. By March of 1959, Julia's correspondence turned visionary, between pages detailing her experiments with anogatine and crope, tea and her advice for surviving relentless media interviews, she pondered legacy. "Paul, do you think they'll remember only the recipes, or will they sense the fire that forged them?" She worried about the gap between memory and myth, the danger that history might sanitize her, smoothing every edge until nothing remained of the woman who dared to whisper. Feed them, flatter them, fan the flames. In coded letters, she sketched a plan to archive her letters, her drafts, even her flour-dusted notebooks, so future readers could taste both the sweetness of her dishes and the heat of her convictions. In her final letter of that section, a postcard penned in haste from New York, Julia enclosed a fragment of a conversation with a curious fan. "You changed my life with butter," the admirer gushed. Julia laughed as she transcribed the exchange. "Change the world with butter, indeed," she scribbled. Then she signed off with an audacious flourish. "Let us keep writing this recipe for life, dear Paul." Each line, each ingredient, an act of rebellion. The letter ended like so many before, with the electric certainty that their story half whispered behind closed doors, half broadcast under bright lights, would forever resist any single narrative. The dawn of 1962 brought a tremor through Julia's world, and her letters to Paul crackle with the fallout. One evening in early March, she described reading a scathing review by Henry Soule in the New York Times, an argument that she had Americanized French cooking into sacrilege. Julia's ink wavered as she wrote, "Hay calls me culinary profanity, but he knows nothing of real flavor." She vowed to reply publicly, yet first confided in Paul over a furious page. She sketched her retort in bold strokes, imagining it published as a manifesto, a challenge to anyone who feared butter more than blandness. She concluded with a flourish of defiance, "Let them starve on their prudence, while we feast on passion." Yet beneath that bravado, she admitted raw uncertainty. She described pacing her Paris apartment at night, recalling Paul's reassuring hand on her back. "I fear his praise has turned to pressure," she confessed. "What if I become a caricature of my own legend?" In a stroke of intimacy, she secretly penciled a small heart at the bottom corner, a silent reminder to herself that love, not acclaim, was her deepest currency. By summer, when the controversy faded and her book sales surged, Julia's letters bloomed with playful ambition again. In late July, she outlined plans for a new venture dinner at Julia's, a television special that would invite 2 guests into her own kitchen. She described every detail, from the floral arrangement on her Formica countertops to the embroidered towels emblazoned with cheeky sayings. But she also enclosed a postscript filled with tenderness. "I wish you could taste the risotto with me tonight. I've added a pinch of nutmeg just as you taught." Even as her career peaked, her private script remained anchored to Paul's palate and presence. Not every line sparkled. In a letter dated October 1963, Julia confided about enduring fatigue and aches, a creeping awareness that her relentless pace might exact a toll. She traced her fingers over a blot in the ink and wrote, "My bones feel as creaky as a poorly seasoned roast." Yet she nodded to her own resilience, recalling how she once endured tropical fevers during OSS missions. She promised Paul that she would rest, if only so she could return to the stove with fresh zeal. That promise was more than pragmatic. It was a vow to preserve the life they'd needed together through decades of flour and fire. Then came the winter that changed everything. In January 1964, Julia's letters shifted to hushed confessions about a lump discovered in her breast. She described her shock in stark, unadorned prose. "I found it one morning in January, while leaning over the sink. I thought at first it was a rogue piece of butter." She detailed the clinical visits with concise clarity. X-rays, radical mastectomy, whispered conversations in sterile corridors. But she also wrote of Paul's fierce protectiveness, the way he held her hand when she awoke from anesthesia, the steady reassurance that her beauty lay in every curve of her laughter. Even amid pain, her sentences carried defiance. "If they think a missing organ will silence my voice, they've never tasted my breath." Recovery became its own chapter in their saga. Julia recounted dusting off her recipe manuscripts while convalescing at home, rearranging her spice racks between rounds of physical therapy. She informed Paul of every milestone. The day she mixed a perfect beurre blanc without trembling, the hour she peeled a carrot without wincing. Each triumph was a line in their private chronicle, proof that courage could season both body and soul. By spring, the letters carried an undercurrent of renewal. In June's dawn, Julia celebrated her return to the limelight with a special broadcast dedicated to cooking through recovery. She wrote with pride of how her story inspired viewers battling illness or tragedy. Yet she confided in Paul that the bravura of live television masked a quiet vulnerability. Those fleeting seconds when the camera cut and she faced the emptiness of an empty kitchen. "I long for your voice off screen," she admitted. "Let me hear its steadiness in my earpiece." The late 1960s saw more sparks fly. In a hastily scribbled note from August 1966, Julia revealed her amusement at uproar over canned vegetables in the way to cook. "They cried foul over my Savoyed carrots," she teased. "But every root can shine under butter's caress." She described Paul's mischievous grin upon discovering her secret addition of tarragon to a can of peas at a demonstration. His laughter, she wrote, was richer than any standing ovation. Yet tensions flared when Simone Beck raised accusations of being overlooked in recipe credits. Julia's letters from November 1967 bear traces of sorrow. She expressed regret that their cherished friendship had frayed over royalties and recognition. "I wish I could knead our bond back together," she lamented. She promised to send Simone a special batch of madeleines, hand-piped with icing, as a symbol of her contrition. With that, she sealed the note with a kiss-shaped wax emblem, hoping it would soften old hurts. As the 1970s dawned, the letters read like love sonnets to domestic revolution. In February 1971, Julia sketched a playful manifesto for married couples. Every kitchen a classroom, every meal a lesson in desire. She described staging elaborate dinner parties to demonstrate the 3Fs, feeding guests sumptuous dishes, flattering their daring palates, fanning conversations until midnight's hush. She urged Paul to co-author a companion volume, arguing that their combined wit could ignite a new generation to treat marriage not as duty, but as creativity, even as her focus turned toward culinary activism. Lobbying for public television funding, speaking on civil rights, her letters never lost their intimate pulse. In a crisp March 1974 postcard postmarked Boston, she scribbled, "I miss your silhouette in this city's skyline." That simple phrase reaffirmed her steadfast belief that love and legacy were inseparable, two sides of the same priceless recipe. In the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Julia's letters to Paul continued weaving a rich tapestry of domestic revolution, personal revelation, and public crusade. In a note dated April 1977, she described returning from a civil rights fundraiser exultant, though her energy flagged by the time she reached her Boston brownstone. "I shook hands with legends today," she wrote, "but I longed only for the comfort of your laughter by candlelight." She sketched her plan to braid activism into her cooking demos, dedicating each menu to a cause, be it racial equality or women's health. So viewers would taste more than food, they would sample justice. Her attachment to real butter, she insisted, wasn't mere gourmandise but an emblem of authenticity in a world growing too processed in politics and in palate. By November 1978, Julia was addressing an urgent threat: proposed cuts to public television funding. In a letter bursting with indignation, she recounted standing in a Washington hallway, petition in hand, urging senators to remember that education isn't confined to classrooms. She vowed to write an op-ed in the Boston Globe and to rally fellow chefs to host televised cook-in vigils, forging a new kind of protest, one measured in tablespoons and hot plates. Her rallying cry was as vivid as her recipes. Just as no good sauce survives overcooking, no good program survives defunding. Beneath her public firestorm, though, lay a private plea. "Paul, my courage falters without your calm voice. Speak last in every debate I wage." In 1980, her correspondence turned toward matters of the heart once more. On Valentine's Day, she penned a playful missive on pink stationery. "Our marriage remains the secret ingredient in every dish." She recounted a tender morning when she woke to find a slip of paper by her bedside reading, "You still set my heart alight." It was from Paul, and she treasured that spur of the moment gesture as proof that love endures beyond the glamour of television. In that same letter, she announced a new monthly ritual, a blindfolded taste test between her and Paul, where each judged the other's cooking without visual cues. "Let's prove that love is taste, not sight," she teased. But joy shared with light-hearted games coexisted with more somber moments. In February 1982, Julia confided in Paul about receiving troubling health news: an early-stage cancer scare, unrelated to her earlier mastectomy. She wrote with stark clarity of the battery of tests she endured, the wait for biopsy results, and the sharp exhale when the diagnosis proved benign. "My heart raced worse than when I flambéed my cherries," she admitted. Yet even in that letter, cracks of humor appeared. She joked that if she survived, she would celebrate with the richest chocolate mousse imaginable. Then, in a softer tone, she added, "All I truly crave is a quiet afternoon with you, free from bright lights and cameras." Suddenly, in October 1983, Simone Beck's claims of recipe credit resurfaced in a magazine exposé. Julia's letter that month dripped with contrition and resolve. She began by admitting her pain at hearing Simone's hurt, then pivoted to genuine apology. "I fear the oven of our friendship cooled when it should have kept baking." She proposed a joint televised reunion. Two women side by side, kneading dough and hashing out their history in full view of the public. She promised to share the spotlight as readily as she shared butter on bread.